welcome to another episode of WYTPod, the online community for e-commerce business owners and entrepreneurs. And today we have the owner of Wag Tantrums. Her name is Barbara Marshall. Barbara, thanks a lot for joining us today. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot for coming. All right, cool. So let's jump right into it. What inspired you to get into the dog food business?
Well, it's unfortunately it's a tale that everybody has. I got a dog that was sick, and there was nobody making food that could help my dog. And unfortunately, I got very involved in, kind of what was going into my dog's food. I have a medical background. I'm in medical sales forever. And I did a lot of startup companies and I traveled a lot. So I had some downtime with the computer, and I really started researching, why my dog wasn't feeling well, why she wasn't doing well. Mm-hmm. And I had access to a lot of physicians as well in the animal lab, simply just because of what I did. And it really came down to, my dog should have been sick. I was feeding her poorly. As the industry is feeding poorly, it's very disappointing to me that we have an industry that's allowed the standards to go so low. And, I clearly started the company because I wanted to help my dog. But really what it boils down to is we need to disrupt an industry that's been cruising on cruise control. It's a $50 billion industry, and they don't use good products. They don't use good proteins. They use feed grade meals to feed your dogs, and it's not good for them. We even have Dr. Lippert did a study with over 500 dogs, and he found out that if you feed your dogs human grade food, you can get almost 33 months more life out of your dog than you can if you feed it kibble. That's 3 years. It's huge. I mean, yep. It's just, there's not a lot of science out there because the industry who can afford to do the studies are not going to do studies that aren't going to be positive for them. But the few studies that we have coming out are great. And it's really shining a light on an industry that's pretty much let down our dogs.
That really resonates with me because, I had to personally change my own nutrition to stay alive. I think a lot of people have gone through that, and there's a lot of increased awareness and focus on, our nutrition as human beings. And I think we all have the best interests at heart for our dogs. But as you mentioned, there are fewer studies. If you go on YouTube, you can't, you can't turn around without seeing 5 videos about the nutrition for yourself, but not so much for dogs. You're right.
Yeah, it's amazing to me. And what's interesting is, nobody likes to think of it this way, but really, back in the day, we used these dogs to do all our animal studies. We used them for our cancer drugs. We used them for our antibiotics. We used them for makeup. We use dogs to test products on, because if they're going to react to something or something's going to help them, their genetic makeup is close enough to ours that we know it will most likely help a human too. So if something's bad for a human, maybe it's bad. It's going to be bad for the dog. It's not a big leap to make if you really sit down and think about it.
Pretty much dogs eat the same food as humans, with a few exceptions, obviously, like chocolate and stuff like that I guess a lot of people know about. But yeah, I mean, it does, like you said, grains are bad for humans and bad for dogs at the same time, right?
No, grains are not bad for dogs. Actually, grains are very good for dogs. It's important for their cardiovascular health that they have grains. And there's this big push. Humans don't like grains. So now there's a big push for not to feed your dog grains. Well, there are present studies going on right now. There actually have been reported deaths to the FDA on grain-free dog foods that may have caused cardiomyopathy and killed some dogs because of the lack of grains. It's very important to have grains in your dog's food unless they're really allergic to it. We don't want to feed our dog exactly like we feed ourselves. If we actually fed ourselves well, like you follow the pyramid properly, you could feed your dog the same thing you're eating. But humans have a tendency to go off on fad diets, and it might work for you, but it's probably not going to work for your dog. So taking a grain away from your dog is not going to work. what happens is you see a lot of dogs that are allergic to grains and commercial foods. It's because they're using cheap, poor substitutes for grain. There's a lot of corn in there, a lot of filler, which the dog doesn't need. When we talk about grains for a dog, we want to talk about really whole grains like quinoa, barley, brown rice. Those really healthy grains. We don't want the cheap grains that are just used as fillers. That's not good for them. But good, healthy grains are really good for them.
Oh, good stuff. That helps me personally. I appreciate that. So now you decided to sell quality dog food, and you realized that you needed to sell it online, I guess, to increase your reach. So can you explain some of the challenges that you faced when you opened your e-commerce store and how you overcame them?
Yeah, some of our biggest challenges that we face really is getting to the right customer. Our customer typically is not on social media. If they are, they're following their kids or their grandkids. They're not using social media to shop. They're certainly not using social media to tell them what to buy. They're educated. They typically have disposable income. Their dog is their life. They could be like, they're empty nesters. Typically our buyer is female. She's the decision maker in the home for, this side of the product. And it's very hard to reach that person because that person is not, on Instagram. And like I said, if they are on Instagram, they're only looking for their kids or their grandkids. So
Sure.
you have trying to reach these people in a different way. And that's very challenging because, they're not social media savvy and they don't want to be social media savvy. And we get that. So it's really a grind trying to find that customer. It's email campaigns help a lot. Obviously having a presence on Facebook helps and a presence on Instagram helps. We do a lot of word of mouth, which is great. But it's hard. It's difficult to find that customer. What I found is these younger customer will typically not necessarily put themselves in debt, but they will spend a little bit more money on themselves than they're going to their dog. For instance, I had when Afterpay came out, I had a friend of mine install Afterpay on her website, and she sells a skincare cream, which is actually Drunk Elephant. And when they put Afterpay on, they had this incredible increase in 7 days in their sales. We put a version of Afterpay on and no one's ever used it in 2 years because
Different
our customer doesn't need to buy their food in installments. And the customer who's using Afterpay is probably not quite ready for us yet. They might like to use this. They may use this one day, but they're just not ready yet.
All right. Great answers. You already answered a couple of my other questions, but can you tell me what separates your dog food from the competitions?
We're organic. We are the only truly organic human grade dog food on the market. There's no one else that's organic. And we get our protein from good, high quality sources. We spend the money on the protein to get your protein up. For instance, you can go in on a lot of our competitors, and the way you are supposed to list your ingredients by law is the most. So like if you have 10 pounds of beef, you should list beef. If you have 8 pounds of vegetables, your vegetables will be next, and so on, and you go down. Right. If you go in and you look at these ingredients list and you read it, you're always going to see there's going to be a beef in our competitors. But then 2 or 3 key ingredients down, you're going to see liver or chicken liver, whatever the protein is. They're using cheaper cuts of protein to get their protein levels up to where they need to be. We don't do that. We use, like if it's chicken, we're not throwing chicken livers in. We're not throwing chicken hearts in. We're just using the organic chicken breast to get your protein where it is. So it's truly human grade and edible. The others are truly human grade and edible too. I'm just not a chicken liver fan or a chicken heart fan. So that's why we don't use that. I consider ours truly edible, where I don't consider the others truly edible. But ours you truly can eat, and it is truly organic, and we're not we're not adding on a cheaper protein to get our protein levels where it needs to be. We're spending the money up front to get the good quality protein.
That's great to hear. That really resonates with me. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say I love my dog quite a bit. I mean, when you're describing your market, apart from being a female, then I'm pretty much your target market.
And you love, I mean, you love your dog. It's like, it's the only thing that really likes you at the end of the day.
That's right. Unconditional love.
Yeah.
You can't get it anywhere else. Maybe from your mom.
They don't care if you've had a bad day. They don't care how you look. They don't care about anything. They just love you.
Must be a very rewarding line of work to be in. So congratulations
it really is.
for that.
It really is. I've always been in some type of healthcare, but it's nice to try to speak for those who can't speak for themselves.
Well said. Well said. Barbara, thanks very much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. Contact details are in the description, and all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This was fun. Thank you.
Same here. Thanks a lot, Barbara.